We begin the current Daf Shabbos Daf Ayin Beis. We begin on the bottom line of Ayin Alvin Beis, where the Gemara continues in the discussion in the previous Daf regarding the Machlekes of Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, which was this concept regarding if you did two Averis of the same type in one Helam, but then you had an awareness of one before the other, which was the Machlekes of Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg we discussed in the previous Daf. Rashi is co-sponsor by Kalzich and Yecheskel, to anytime Daf Chaim. Them joining us on Zoom, we greatly appreciate it. So, the first thing we're going to discuss is regarding, as we said, when there's chaylev that was eaten, forbidden fats, and in the same lapse of awareness, it was different eating. Let's say it was beyond a k'teach pras, not the same act of eating. It was an hour later, 2 hours later, was but one lapse of awareness, but you had an awareness of one before the other regarding the obligation to bring multiple karbanos. Additionally, we're going to have an Amid Beis, a question regarding, let's say someone intends to cut something detached from the ground, and inadvertently cut something that's attached to the ground. What's the halacha going to be in that case? Some important terms of conscience we're going to have in this daf is what's called shivcha charufa, which is a maidservant that's married to a man. She has a unique halacha, as we're going to see, unlike an eshes ish. A regular married woman has a certain halacha, a shivcha charufa, which is actually a machlekes elsewhere, exactly the precise parameters of that, but suffice it to say it's like a married maidservant regarding the halacha if someone has relations with her. A korban asham, which there's two types we're going to be discussing in today's daf. That of a asham vade is definitive asham, certain sins require korban asham, and what's called the asham tali, which is the halacha that if someone doesn't know if he committed a sin or not, he brings what's called the suspended asham, until he finds out that he definitively made a sin, and then he actually brings a korban chatas, which is actually part of our discussion. Then there's a term called misasik, which is, unlike that of shagaga, of making an error, which he knows what he's doing, he just didn't realize he was missing something, he doesn't know it's Shabbos, doesn't know it's malacha. Misasik is, you're totally preoccupied, you don't realize what you're doing, and that has a different halacha than shagig, and also the concept known as aima mutter, which is, if someone says it's permitted, it's also not like a regular shagaga. So our Gemara is continuing from the previous stuff, as we said, regarding the machlekes of Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, which we said if you do two prohibited consumptions of forbidden fats in one lapse of awareness, but then you have an awareness of one before the other, or like we said, we weren't sure exactly. We had three different choices. What was actually machlekes of Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, or is it about dafrasha? But be that as it may, is regarding if yediyas are mechalkos or not. Yechon says you can be chayav two karbans because yediyas are mechalkos. The awareness of one sin. Even though the sins themselves were in one lapse of awareness, the awareness of one separates it now from the other one, and now it's an independent entity of a carbon. The Shlokas says, no, it's one carbon, only have frashas on machalkis, let's say, if we're going with that side in the Gemara, but Yedis would not be machal. Now, we begin the Gemara like this. Amar Ulu. He says, Laman da Amar, according to the one who says, what we're referring to over here is a machlekes between Reb Tarfon and Reb Akiva, that's Bur Masechtes Kris Nafcham Beis Amenav. Reb Akiva holds that one is liable for a suffix on me'ilah. Let's say he's not sure if it misappropriated from hektish, an asham tali. So if let's say he had in front of himself two pieces of meat, one was that of hektish, one was that of chulin, and then he eats one of the pieces, doesn't know which one he ate, so he has to bring an asham tali, a suspended asham. Not sure if he did a sin or not. Now, Rabbi Kiva, however, agrees that he did not bring what's called es me'ilasai. What that means to say is he does not bring the penalty of the principle and the added fifth of committing me'ilah because he doesn't know for sure if he did me'ilah. You have to bring an asham tali because that's whenever you're not sure if he did a sin, but you're not responsible for the liability of compensating hektish with the additional penalty of a fifth until you find out for sure that you did. Then when you find out that you for sure did me'ilah, you bring with that payment of the money also now your asham me'ilas. Asham me'ilas is the definitive asham that you bring when you know for sure that you committed me'ilah. Because just like asham tali but all other averos, when you're not sure if you committed a sin of karis, it's not really a full atonement when you bring asham tali. It's only until you find out that you for sure sinned, then you bring a karmachatis. So Rabbi Kiva holds here also. When you find out that you did commit me'ilah definitively, then when you give the payment, you're going to have to bring a new carbon, an asham vade, because now you know for sure you committed the sin. Just like by chatas, so to by asham. Rabbi Tavin disagrees. He says, his words are, malazem mevi shtei hashamis. Why should he bring two hashamis? Meaning, the halacha of asham toli, of a doubt by chatas, is not the same thing as by me'ilah. Why not? It's a sin with a carbon. No. Over there, by a chatas is something interesting. The suffix, when you're not sure if you did the sin, or whatever the sin was, that you have to bring a chatas on, let's say chaylev, you can bring an ayo, which is a ram, which is a zachar. When you know for sure you did the sin of chaylev, you're going to bring a female animal, which is what the chatas is. Oh, so therefore, when you find out that you for sure did the wrong thing, you have to bring in the keva. It's two different karbanas. So of course, you're going to bring two different karbanas, an asham tali and then the karban chatas. But over here says Reb Tarfon, where they're both the same type, as the Gemara over there explains, the same type of a carbon you bring on the definitive chet of me'ilah is what you bring on the suffix, which is the asham tali. Both of them are on the ayil. So it says Reb Tarfon, it says like this: let him bring the principal and an added fifth, and let him bring an ayil. Let him bring one ram, and let him say like this: if I for sure committed me'ilah, so this is my me'ilah, and this is my carbon asham, my asham vade, my asham me'ilas. Now, if it's a suffix, meaning if I'm never going to find out if I really did commit the sin or not, so let this asham be my asham tali. And although then if I didn't for sure definitively do me'ilah, I don't have to give the keren and the chaimish, so let this money I'm giving to Hektish be in the dava. And when he subsequently finds out that he did do it, he doesn't have to bring another asham, because it's the same carbon. Whichever it's going to be, let it be. So, one thing we see from this is like this. Obviously, Reb Tarfon holds that you don't have to know beforehand that you definitively committed a sin to bring an asham vadai of asham me'ilas before you bring the atonement. Because what's his maman of shach? He's telling Rebbe Kiva, no, Reb Tarfon saying you don't have to bring two ashamas, asham tali and then again asham vadai. It's the same carbon. Just like make a tanai. If I'm sure going to find out that I did it, it's going to be Masham Nadi. If I'm not going to find out, let it be Masham Tali. Wait a second. How is it going to end up being your Asham Vade when you find out about it? You mean you bring a carbon now that in 2 years from now you're going to find out for sure you did it? But that means to say you didn't have an awareness of your sin before you brought the Asham Vade. Oh, obviously you see, Reb Tarfon holds, you don't need to have knowledge of the sin by the Asham Vade to have an atonement with it. Oh, so that's what the Gemara is going on. With that introduction, meaning Rabbi Kiva holds, as we're going to explain later on, holds you do need to have a Yediyah B'tchila, so you must be aware that he sinned, which is actually similar to Karban Chatas. Karban Chatas says, if you have to know before, you can't just bring a Karban Chatas if you don't know you sin. You have to know that you sin to be able to bring it. If you're unsure, then you bring an Asham Tali, and if he discovers, then he has to bring an Asham Vade. Rabbi Kiva holds Asham is the same thing as Chatas. Rabbi Tarfon disagrees, says, no, you don't have to have a knowledge of the sin beforehand. No, it's different than Chatas. Chatas says, Oy Hoida, when you know, then you can bring it. Asham does not, you don't have to know. So therefore he can make that tonight. Let the Asham Tali be, or Asham Vade. So it says, according to the opinion of Rabbi Tarfon, that holds by Asham Vadai, a definitive Asham, meaning, as Rashi explained, all Ashamas are called the Asham Vadai, besides the Asham Tali, which is when what's called loy haidi, when you don't know if you sinned or not. But the asham vade are actually three different types of sins. Meaning, generally, if someone doesn't have it brings a kamachatas. The Rabbi Shloimy felt that three sins, and there's explanations why asham in the translation of asham versus chatas, why it is that way. There's three sins that we bring a definitive sin on asham. Asham me'ilas, which we're discussing up until now, when someone misappropriated from hektish. There's asham gizelis regarding theft. And there's Sham Shifcha Charufa, which we're also going to discuss right now, regarding by a married maidservant woman, that when someone has relations with her, which is like an Eshes, he has to bring an Asham. So it says, according to the one who says, that by Asham Vada, which we're talking about Reb Tarfon, that holds Loi Bo Yedi B'Tchil, you don't have to have an awareness beforehand. That's what we just proved. We said that you don't have to have awareness, because according to Reb Tarfon, you're bringing this carbon as an Asham Tali, and if you end up finding out, it'll be the Asham Vada, so you don't even have the awareness beforehand. So you have the following halach. Now, before we say, what the halach is, you can take that by Beis Amalf. As we mentioned in the introduction, a shifcha rufa is a shifcha kenan is given to an evet ivri. She's forbidden to everybody else, but if someone cohabits with her, he's obligated to bring a carbon ash. So on that rule comes to say the following halach. As continue the top of Beis Amalf, like we're saying, kol moyim shifcha rufa. Everyone agrees by. Actually, we're going to explain this later on in the Gemara, but you can see this as we go along. But the Gemara on the bottom of this Amen is going to summarize all the three things we're going to be discussing. This is the first thing we're discussing. Bal chamesh be'ilas. If someone had committed 5 acts of cohabitation, b'shivcha charufa, with a married maidservant. Now, he did this by mistake. He didn't know that this was forbidden, or that she was a married, whatever error he did. And additionally, as Rashi explains, he realized between every act of cohabitation that he had done something wrong. So it says Ula, Reb Tarfon would hold over here in this case that ein chayiv ela achas. Did you only be liable for one carbon asham? Now Rashi explains. Why is he picking specifically shivcha charufa? Because shivcha charufa is one of those sins that you're going to bring one carbon for many sins. As the Mishnah teaches in Kriyas Daf Testament Aleph, the Mishnah there discusses there are 5 types of sins that you can bring one carbon for many sins. And one of them is Habal HaShifcha Biyasar. If someone has cohabitations with the Shifcha, with many acts of cohabitation, he's going to be liable for one liability. Now, as Rashi explains, meaning that what the Mishnah over there is coming to teach you is that you're going to be exempt with one carbon. That's talking about when you did it deliberately, which is, what's interesting about Shifcha Charufa is also that generally a carbon is only brought when you do something by mistake. The Chiddush in Shifcha Charufa is that there's a liability of a carbon even if you do deliberate, as if you did it by mistake. Why? Because the pasuk in Vayikra your test that says bikairis tia, it should be bikairis, which means like an investigation, but also means a punishment of malchus. Malchus is only when you do something b'mezid, not when you do b'shegig, and therefore we know that the liabilities of the shifcha charufa, which includes the carbon, is even if you do it b'mezid. Now, regarding mezid, when someone does deliberately, he knows she's shifcha charufa, he knows she's forbidden tar, and he goes and he crabs with her anyway. The pasuk includes that you're going to be exempted, which generally when you do something b'mezid, so you can't call behelam echad. Meaning up until on the previous daf, we were talking about you do something behelam echad, five of the same sin in one lapse of witness, you have only one karbachatas. Here, when you do something b'mezid, there's no helam echad, there's no halama, no lack of awareness. The guy knows. Okay, so he goes, you can have it, you can have it, you can have it. So on that, as the Gemara learns out over there, that you're going to be chayv only one carbon for all the acts of cohabitation. Now, as Rashi explains, for sure, when you did all those, let's say, 5 acts of cohabitation by mistake, in error, when there was a one lapse of awareness, okay, it's one lapse of awareness. Of course, you may only one carbon nashim, as we always say, regarding one lapse of awareness, even if it was 5 times you did the same sin, you may only one carbon. Now, but that again would be even only if it's, let's say, b'mezid, so there's no halam at all, but that we learn that you only have one carbon, or b'shoiging one lapse of awareness. But if, let's say, as the case that Ula is describing, you had a shagaga, it was by mistake. He didn't know it was forbidden. And he became aware between every act of cohabitation that he had done something wrong. So this is what the chiddush of Ula is in Reb Tarfon. According to the one who requires yediyah beforehand, to know that you sinned, to bring an Asham Vade, which that's Rebbe Kiva. So that means to say that regarding Ashamais, yediyah is significant. What do you mean yediyah is significant? Meaning, you see that you need an awareness to be chayv an asham. It's a chalais. It's taking effect. Without a yediyah, there's no chiyav of an asham. Only if you have a yediyah, according to Rebbe Kiva, is that going to be a chiyav of an asham. So therefore, according to Rebbe Kiva, awarenesses are considered halachically significant. You need an awareness. So therefore, that would separate the ashamais as if you had an atonement that separates for someone who does something deliberately. Because an awareness is a whole new thing. It's separating the act. Like by mazid, even though we said mazid, if you do deliberately the shif charupa once, twice, 3 times, one day and next day, doesn't make a difference. You can be chayv only one, but that's only if you didn't bring a carbon yet. Once you brought a carbon, of course, you brought a carbon, you go do it again. Of course, you can be chayv another carbon. So on that Rashi is explaining the pretext over here for what Reb Ula's chiddush in Reb Tarfon is that according to Reb Kiva, that holds you do need a yediyah. The yediyah is mechalik, and therefore you can have to bring a carbon on every single act of cohabitation. According to Rabbi Yochanan in Rebbe Kiva, that he had previously said that even if you eat 2 olive-sized pieces of chalib in one lapse of awareness, so it was really one halam, so really should be one carbon. But as we explained in the previous time, if you had an awareness, if there was a separation in the awarenesses, you first became aware of one of the 2 things, then that yediyah is going to be machalik, and you're going to bring a chatas in every single one individually, because the awareness is itself a separation. So it's almost like as if you brought a carbon between the 2 yediyahs. So here also, what Rabbi Yochanan would hold in Rabbi Kiva is that the yediyah is considered significant, as if you brought a carbon between every act of cohabitation, and therefore according to Rabbi Kiva, you actually would be chayav a separate carbon in each act of cohabitation. And that's what Ula is coming to tell us, that regarding Reb Tarfon, that does not require a yediyah by an asham initially, so it's not significant. A yediyah by asham doesn't have halachic relevancy, and therefore it's not going to separate between them. So therefore, even though you have an awareness, what's going to come out is that you're going to be chayv only one, because since the yediyah is not significant, so it's not machalik. Now Rashi wonders, why is this teaching of Ula coming in over here? It's because right after Ula, we're going to say the teaching of Rav Dimi, which is really the parallel of Ula, just coming from the different angle. Ula is going on Rav Tarfon, Rav Dimi is going to come on Rav Kiva, and Rav Dimi's teaching, we're going to ask them for the Machlekes of Yechid Mishlek, so we taught in the previous Daf. That's why we're introducing that over here. So this was the first halacha taught on this Daf, Ula's teaching. Now, on that teaching, Maskil Rav Nuna says, wait a second. If that's the case that you're saying, that over here, you're telling me the Yediyas are not going to be mechalik, according to Reb Tarfon, because Yediyas are not significant. So let me tell you, he says it in a more sarcastic way. He says, Bo, b'chazra bo. Let's say someone had an active cohabitation with the Shivcha Urfa, and then again he does active cohabitation. And then the Hitrish carbon, and then he designates a carbon. And then V'amar, then he says, oh, wait a second, Hamtinulu, wait for me, don't bring the carbon yet. I want to chaperine another one. Acha evil, until I do active cohabitation again. Now the Mefarshim explain it doesn't really mean like that, because you're not talking about a case of a maze, it's really B'shagi. But it's a way of saying it as if, what? You separated the carbon, and you didn't sacrifice it yet, then he does it again. You can tell me that he's not going to be chayv only one? Because it's not significant until you actually bring the carbon? How can you say that there's not going to be mechalik? So that Amalei said to him, as one could infer from even understanding the different cases that he's asking on, he says, no. Are you talking about an action after the separation? Meaning, of doing a bia after you already designated a carbon? No, that I never said. I didn't say anything about doing an act of bia after it is separated. All I said was that all there was were yediyas. The knowledge is not significant, and that's going to be one carbon. But if after, let's say, he did shivcha rupa, he then went separate a carbon, no, separating a carbon, of course, then if you did it again, it would be a separate liability. I wasn't saying anything about that. I was saying that yediyas, according to Tarfon, is not significant, as we learned regarding Asham Vadil, you don't have to have yediyas, so therefore it's not machalik, therefore it's going to be one carbon. There's one teaching, we'll get back to that, as the Gemara is going to actually summarize all the cases. Case number 2 is Ki Asr Rav Dimi. When Rav Dimi came, this is actually what we're showing over here as case number 3. Ki Asr Rav Dimi, when Rav Dimi came, as Rashi explains, is not disagreeing with Ula. It's just that Rav Dimi is coming to explain Rabbi Kiva, who holds that you do need a Yediyah by Asham to be able to bring your Asham Vadli. And Ula is in explaining Reb Tarfon, who holds that you don't need to have a Yediyah, and therefore holds Yediyahs are not machal. So Rav Dimi is essentially saying the same thing, just a parallel in Rabbi Kiva. When Rav Dimi came, he said the following teaching. He says, Lamandam, according to the one who says, Asham Vadeh, by a definitive Asham, meaning to know for sure you bring your Asham Vadeh, let's say by Asham Eilis. You have to have an awareness before, which that was Rabbi Kiva. So he says the same case, and the halach is going to be otherwise. If a man cohabited 5 different times with the shivcha charufa, and then he became aware of between each time that he did something wrong, he's liable for each one independently. Now, at this point of the Gemara assumes according to Rav Dimi that it says over there in that Mishnah, that if someone had relations with the shivcha charufa many times, he's only mechayiv only one, that either that's talking about, and he did it deliberately, so deliberately there's nothing with halamis, nothing with yediyas, you always know what you're doing wrong. That's as the Gemara there teaches why you can be chayv only one time. Or it's talking about that you did it by mistake with one lapse of awareness. That's what the Allah is talking about, you can be chayv only one carbon. But let's say you made a mistake, and then you found that in between every active biyah that you made a mistake, and then again you did it, and then again you realized, and then again you did it, and then again you realized, then the one who holds that yediyah is significant by the asham, which is Rabbi Kiva, who holds you can't be chayv and asham bada until you become aware, would hold that it would be mechalekes. All these ideas would separate, even according to Resh Lakish. Meaning, we quoted Resh Lakish on the previous Daf, who holds that yediyah is not mechalek by carbon chatas. Over here, he would agree that yediyah between the averos would be mechalek, because over here it's yediyah in between the averos. There he's talking about in. You didn't know between the averos. It was a hell of echad. You only became aware afterwards, one awareness after the other awareness. So then he says, no, that yediyah is not mechalek. The averos one hell. But here the yediyahs are inside the averos itself. The averos were not behel echad because he had yediyah that Resh Lakish would agree in Rabbi Kiva that the halacha would be that you be chayiv on every single one individually. Resh Lakish would agree that you'd be chayiv on each one. Yediyahs would be mechalek in this case when it's between the sins, not between the awarenesses of knowing your liability for the carbon. However, not only Abaye says to Rav Dimi, he says, wait a second, how could you say this? Harichatas, You have the halacha of korban chatas. There, everyone agrees, as we said all along, by korban chatas, everyone agrees you have to have an awareness beforehand. Which, if you bring a korban chatas before you're aware of the sin, that's not going to atone, because the pasuk says in Yirgadal, you have to first become aware of the sin, and then you can't just bring it if you don't know. If you don't know, and then you bring it when you end up finding out, you have to bring a korban chatas. So everyone agrees over there that you need to do b'tchila. And still, still we have a machlekes and Rish Lakish. And Rish Lakish says that the diyas after the sins are not going to be mechalik to be chayev for two liabilities on the two olive-sized pieces of forbidden fats and one lapse of awareness. So, and that was the machlekes on the previous time. That was machlekes Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg. Do we say that the diyas are going to be mechalik in the case of chatas? So obviously that we see that he does not consider a chilik of yediyah significant, although you need yediyah to be chayav korban chatas. He still doesn't say that yediyah itself is going to be like a division of, let's say, that you already brought your korban and you had an atonement. So therefore, on that Abaye asks, so by the shivcha charufa, which the person is doing it by mistake, and then and this is where it gets interesting. For a person might be thinking, now, what are you talking about? How are we comparing Rish Lakish, which his case that he disagrees with Rabbi Yochanan in the previous daf is not on the ideas between the sins, that the sins were done by halamecha. The ideas that we're saying if they're machalik or not, that Rish Lakish says not machalik, is after the sin. Then, okay, you did the sin, that you were in one lapse of awareness. But how about now to become aware of the liability, which is only then you can bring your korban chatas. So that's where Rish Lakish disagrees with Rabbi Yochanan, and he says that, okay, that idea of now that you're liable is not going to separate the sins which are done by halamecha. Yochanan says no, it is going to separate. You may have two chatas. What's interesting is we're going to see over here a case of awareness between the sins that's going to be like the awareness after the sins, and that's going to be separate awarenesses for the liability, as Rashi explains. It says by shivcha charufa, the awareness between the cohabitations is not like bringing a carbon that would be significant to separate them. Why? Meaning, by shivcha charufa, which we mentioned, is very unique. Shivcha charufa, one is liable if he never does it deliberately. Now, if you're doing it, meaning that you're liable if you do it even deliberately. Generally, you don't bring a carbon for deliberately. No, shivcha charufa, you know you're doing it wrong. There's a liability of a carbon. Additionally, we said when you do it b'mezid many times in a row, we said you're only going to bring one carbon. So even though there's obviously what's called chilik yediyah by mezid, because you know what you're doing, and so therefore that's a different awareness of a new act. Still, we said that Allah, as the Gemara explains over there, that you can bring one carbon for all the 5 be'ilos. So therefore, here also, when you do it by mistake, by the shivcha charufa, you can bring one carbon on them all. It's essentially like when you have an awareness between the sins, it's no better, or what do you call worse, than the case of memezit 5 times, they bring one carbon in the mold. As Rashi explains even further, he says, this is not the same thing as when you have an awareness between eating one chaylev and you have an awareness between another chaylev, where everyone agrees that that's going to be machalaka, is not halamecha. No, because there, what's your liability? It's on the shkaga. It's on the halama. So once you have an awareness, okay, so it's 2 different shkagas. But by shivcha charufa, like we said, it's even if you do b'mezid. So liability is not in the halama, and we see you can be chayv on 1 even if you do 5 mezids. So therefore, that's what Abaye is asking on Rav Dimi. He's saying that this is essentially the ideas post sins for the liability of chatas is the same thing as yediyas between the sins in the asham of the shivcha charufa. Why? Because, like we just explained, it's not the same thing as like chaylev, like a fachatas. When you ate one chaylev and then another chaylev. If you had awarenesses in between those sins, that, okay, it's machalik. Of course machalik. You know why it's machalik? Because your carbon is coming because of your error of shkaga. When you have an halama, it's not a shkaga anymore. So now you have a new shkaga, it's a new halama. So it's a new chiv of achatas. But by asham or shivcha charufa, it's not for your halama. How do you know it's not for halama? Because you're chayv not even on a mezid. And mezid, if you do 5 mezid in a row, and you never separate a carbon yet, they're all going to be with 1 carbon. So therefore, if you're going to say something is going to be machalik, it would be machalik no matter where it is, between the sins, or post sins, is it machalik as an atonement or not? So in that we're saying that we see by Rish Lakish that he would disagree with the premise that you're saying. You're trying to say that according to Rabbi Kiva, everyone's going to agree that if you have yediyas between the acts of cohabitation, you can be chayv each one individually. But why? Yediyah? Who cares about yediyah? Rish Lakish holds yediyas is not machalik. What do you mean? He says that by chatas, a post sin. Yeah, but asham in the sin by Shavuva is like chatas post sin because it doesn't have the difference of in the sins, which is yediyas machalik because it's not halamachas, because you don't need halamachas, because even by memezid, by that of the shivcha rupa. So essentially, his question is, according to Shlakish, it's not true what you're saying. So the Gemara says ishtik. So Rabbi was silent. So that Amalei Sabaya said to him, Dilma, maybe this that you had said, and you said this obvious halacha, that you were saying according to Rabbi Kiva, the one who holds that you need to have an awareness to be chayiv on the halacha of an asham vadai, that you wanted to say that you can be chayiv on each one of these shivcha rupa individually if you have a D in between, and you wanted to say it even according to Rish Lakish, maybe b'maisa delacha frasha kamran. Maybe what you were talking about was the bi'iyah that comes after, not after yediyas, but after the separation of karbanas. That's what you were talking about. And that would be, you could Rav Amnuna, like Rav Amnuna that we mentioned previously, that the question we had asked on Rav Amnuna, that he says that it doesn't help after hafrasha. And that Ula says, yes, I agree, I wasn't talking about that's going to be one liability for all the five according to Reb Tarfon. If you had, you did it after the hafrasha, I only said it after the yediyah. So the same thing here is in reverse according to Rebbe Kiva. That according to Rebbe Kiva, what you're saying is, oh, you can be chayv in each one individually if you did shivcha rufa, then made hafrasha, then shivcha rufa, then hafrasha. Oh, yeah, that's where you would say that the Allah would be chayv in each one individually. But if it was only in the awareness beforehand, then no, even according to Rebbe Kiva, even though he requires yediyah to be chayv a carbon asham, and he considers yediyah chashav and significant, it would still be the machlekes Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. According to Rabbi Yochanan, that considers yediyah significant to be mechalik when you eat forbidden fats, or even if you, let's say you eat two forbidden fats and one helam echad, that he holds that it's going to be mechalik the yediyah of it, it would divide, and therefore each one of these, where when there's yediyah, would divide. But according to Rish Lakish, that he says over there, by chatas, it would not be mechalik. So you're right, over here, Rish Lakish would hold that even if you're having a yediyah between each act of biyah, it would not be mechalik between each act of biyah, which it's even though it's like, meaning in other words, it's like two acts of eating forbidden fats and one lapse of awareness, and you became aware of it afterwards, and you had separate yediyahs afterwards, like we said, it's the same thing. The yediyah of the chatas post-sin is the same thing really as asham with the sin, and therefore, because like we said, by the asham of the shivcha, it's not dependent on the halama and the shkago, because you chayv even amazing. So therefore, Shlakish would hold actually that you be chayv one carbon, that only the frashas would be mechalik, but not the yediyahs be mechalik. And this halacha was only said when you're doing a mice after the frasha, not after the yediyah. And that Amalei Rav Dimi says, and you're right. That's what I meant to say. Not that that you can be chayv each one if you on each one according to Kibbutz, if you have a d between them. Only if you had a hafrasha after each one, then you be chayv on each one individually. Now, Kiasa Ravin, when Ravin came, so now we're going to go through all the three cases. When Ravin came, he said it like this. He said three different categories and these cryptic statements, and these are going to allude to the three things we discussed here on this stuff. He says, Hakol Moed, everyone agrees, meaning Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, they both agree, B'shivcha Charufa, by the married maidservant, that there is something, both of them agree, there's something that will divide and separate the acts of cohabitation to be liable on each one individually. Also, Hakol Moed, everyone agrees, B'shivcha Charufa, by the married maidservant, that there's a case that it's not going to divide, and that you can chayv only one. And then you have a third case, and we're going to go through them all right now, as Gemara is going to explain them, umachlekes, and then you have where both of them disagree, b'shivcha ruva by the maidservant, where according to Rabbi Yochanan, it will be considered a chilik, and you'll be chayv individually. According to Shlakish, it's not going to be considered a chilik, and the Gemara is going to explain them all right now. The Gemara begins. Hakol moedim b'shivcha charufa. Everyone agrees by the married maidservant, the ein chayev ela achas. This is the first case we start off the daf with, that you can be chayiv only one liability for all the acts of cohabitation of the shivcha rufa. That's kedula, like we open up the daf. Meaning, according to Reb Tarfon, that holds that you don't have to have an awareness b'chlal. When you come to bring an asham bada, you don't have to know about it beforehand, like we explained from the Gemara in Masechtas Krisis. Oh, so over there, even Rabbi Yochanan is going to agree that according to Reb Tarfon, the yediyah is not significant. So therefore, even if you have yediyas between each act of the bia, like we said, it's not significant according to Reb Tarfon, you can only one carbon. Because when does Rabbi Yochanan say yediyas are machalik, and that even between two acts which were done in one halama, still if you become aware post game and separate halama, separate yediyas, you can be each one individually. That's by a chatas, where its awareness is significant, because by a chatas you have to have an awareness to be chayv on the carbon. So it's significant, and therefore there the yediyas machalik. By Ashim, according to Reb Tarfon, you don't need to know, so yediyas is not significant, and therefore it's not going to separate. That everyone agrees in according to Rabbi Yochanan. In Reb Tarfon, that was all his teaching, that you'll be mechayv only one carbon. Okay, case number 2. Everyone agrees by the shivcha charufa, meaning in this case, even Rish Lakish is going to agree that you will say they're going to be separate liabilities, even according to Reb Tarfon, that does not require a yediyah to be chayiv on a vadai. That everyone's going to agree the chayiv al kol achas v'achas, that you will be liable on each one individually. For example, where if he did a bia, the next bia was after a hafrasha, which was like the teaching that we brought of Krav Hamnuna, that Rish Lakish would agree, and the way Rashi says Reb Tarfon would agree that, yeah, if you did 5 acts of cohabitation with Shivcha Charufa, and you didn't just have a yediyah between them, you had a hafrasha, everyone agrees in that case it would be a separate carbon for the next violation, because hafrasha is machal. The third case is a machlekes. What's a machlekes? Rish Lakish, which that was alluded to by Abaya on his question on Rav Dimi, which he said that still remains a machlekes, and actually Rav Dimi's halacha was this, what we call Rav Abnuna's halacha, which was, it's going to be separate carbons liabilities only when there's afrasha. What's the case that would still be a machlekes Rish Lakish? Would be b'shiv charuva by the maidservant. That is lamanda ma'ashan vade b'yidi b'tchilom, according to Rabbi Kiva, that requires a definitive awareness beforehand to be chayiv on Asham Vadai, so he considers awareness significant by the laws of Asham. That's where machlekes Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. According to Rabbi Yochanan, that he says that the awareness by chatas, since it's significant, it will divide even by post sins. When it was done by halama echad, all the sins were done with one lapse of awareness. But post sin, you became aware of one, and not the other, that will be machalik between the two of them. Siroso, it will be machalik. Even if you have been in one halama or in 2 halamas, doesn't make a difference. It's going to separate the karbanis because the yediyas are machalkis. According to Shlakish, that he says that the awareness by chatas, even though awareness by chatas is significant, that it doesn't take effect your liability of chatas until you become aware of it. Even so, he says over there that it will not separate the sins when you become aware in separate awarenesses, as long as the sins were done with hell and echad. So here also, even though it's in 2 halamas, it's not going to be machalik like we explained, because it's not like you brought a carbon. And here we're saying the liability is not mitzad shkaga, because we said the chiv is even if you do b'mezid. So in the sins is the same as post sins in the case of shivcha charufa, and the Rish Lakish would hold that you still would be chayiv 1 carbon, because only hafrashas are machalik, and the fact of the yediyas is not going to be machalik, just like he holds by chatas the post is not going to be machalik. Here in the halamas, he holds they're not going to be machalik. It's going to be just like if you had the awareness only at the end. The awareness in between is the machlekes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, in according to Rabbi Kiva, that the yediyas are significant. Would that be machalik between them or not? That's the machlekes Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. Now we continue in a related vein with regarding when one commits many sins, and also regarding the topic of our parak, regarding the topic of our opening mission, regarding chil Shabbos, and when it's done b'shkaga in error. Now, in what we learned as we continue to the days, niskaven like b'as a touch. If someone had intention to lift up something that was detached, for example, let's say the way Rashi describes the case is that if his knife fell in a patch of vegetables, and he's intending to pick up the knife, so he's intending to pick up something that's detached. But as he's picking up his knife, he actually ends up tearing something that's attached. So that says the Gemara Patri is going to be exempt, because it says in the pasuk Asher chata ba, it says that you sinned in it, which the Gemara increases, expounds. That means that you have to be intending to do this act. That excludes what's called misasik. What's misasik? So it's a famous machlekes Rashi and Taisus. What's misasik? We're just going to touch it. So Rashi says misasik is that you're engaged in something else and you end up doing something totally different. That you're not chayiv for Shabbos. That's not a melech. It's not Shabbos. That you can be totally apart. Now, what's considered shkaga? What's in doing shkaga misasik? An error is I'm intending to do this. I know what I'm doing. I'm conscious. There's a yediyah that I don't know. I don't know that today's Shabbos. I don't know that melacha is forbidden. But misasik is I'm intending to do an act of lifting, and I end up doing something totally different, which is an act of tearing. That you're going to be part of. Now, but let's say a different halacha. Let's say your intention was lach teches hatalish. You wanted to cut something that was detached, but that's not a malacha Shabbos. You want to cut something that's detached, but you want to do the act of cutting for something that's detached. And then you cut something that's attached. So Taisus explains that Rashi would hold in this case. Rashi doesn't comment on this case. He says, according to Rashi, what this would mean is that you intended to cut this thing that's detached. You ended up cutting something else that's attached. But let's say if you intended to cut this thing that's attached, and you cut something else that's attached, sounds like according to Rashi, then you would be chayiv because you intended to doing a cutting that's forbidden. But Rabbi Tam disagrees, and he says no. The case that we're discussing over here is where you intended to cut something that's detached, and it turns out that that thing itself that you think is attached is really attached, and therefore he's cutting what he intended to do, but he just doesn't know that it's attached. And the reason why Taisa likes that interpretation, as we'll see at the end of the sugya, because the Gemara later on, as we'll end off on the next daf, on the top of the Amid, the Gemara explains the case of Shagag B'lei Miskav and Deshar Mitzvahs, which we're going to jump into right away, the next thing the Gemara is going to discuss. Someone made an error, and he didn't intend to do something regarding other mitzvahs in contrast to Shabbos. The Gemara says, what's that case that's parallel by Shabbos? Where he thinks it's Shuman, and he eats it, and it turns out that that thing itself that he thinks is Shuman is really Chayla. Well, that would be, according to Rabbi Tam, exactly like the case of Shabbos, where you're doing the thing that you're doing, but you think it's something else. You're cutting this thing that you think is detached, but it's really attached. According to Rashi, it would be more difficult to make the comparison, but that's a classic machlekes Rashi and Taisus regarding how to qualify the category of what misasik actually is. But be that as it may, let's go with Rashi, how to translate that. That here you're intending to cut something that's detached. Turns out that it's really attached. So we have machlekes. Rav Amapati says this is also going to be considered misasik, and you'll be patur because you didn't intend to do this act of detaching. Abayam says chayv, no, you can be chayv. Why? So the Gemara explains the machlekes. Rav Amapati says you're going to be exempt. Why? Because tahalei niskam the chaticha d'isura. You didn't intend to do a forbidden cutting. Yeah, you intended to do cutting, but not a forbidden cutting. So that was, you were not conscious in that act. Abayam achayv is liable because no, the hakam acham chaticha ba'alma. You intended to do an act of cutting. That's not going to qualify for your misasik. You did a cutting and you want to do a cutting. Like you didn't want to do a forbidden cutting, but you want to do a cutting. That's machlekes Abaye. Abaye has no. Since you intend to do the act of cutting, that would qualify for a shgaga, not for a misasik, and therefore you're going to be chayv for a cover. Now, Amar Rabbah. So now the Gemara comes to explain Menah Minul. It says, where do I get this idea from? That even if it's quote unquote what's called a partial misasik, it's really a partial misasik because Abaye is correct on some level. You intend to do an act of cutting. Rabbah says no, you didn't intend to do a forbidden cutting. So although you intended to do this action, but again, Rashi takes different ways of describing it, but you didn't have to do it exactly all the way. So Rabbah says that's going to be misasik and patur. Says, where do I get this from? That even a partial misasik is going to make you patur. The Tanya like learn the brisa. Now this is a lengthy brisa, going on to the top of the next amid, which is going to take us a few lines in. And again, in classic Talmudic style, we're going to have to first explain the whole brisa, and only after we explain the whole brisa are we going to be able to tell you what's Rabbah's proof in the brisa. So settle in for the brisa. The brisa says like this: Chaymer Shabbos mishar mitzvahs. There's a stringency that you have on Shabbos in contrast to other mitzvahs, and also the Chaymer Shabbos mitzvahs Shabbos. You have a stringency that applies to all of the other target mitzvahs over that of Shabbos. How do you understand the brisa? So the brisa explains: Chaymer Shabbos mishar mitzvahs. The brisa itself says the stringency of Shabbos over the other mitzvahs is Shabbos regarding Shabbos. Asa shtayim b'helam echad. If you do multiple violations in a single period of forgetfulness, to be liable on every single malacha, like we said, when you have shigas malachas, even though it's one chil Shabbos, you be chayiv on every single malacha itself. In contrast to other mitzvahs, which by other mitzvahs, the Gemara is actually going to explain this halacha, but regarding all the other mitzvahs, you're not going to be chayiv individually. Now, and the Gemara is going to actually find this difficult. Shabbos, it's true of other mitzvahs over Shabbos is that Shabbos mitzvah by other mitzvahs shagag. If you made an error, this line is going to be open for discussion in the Gemara how to actually translate it, as Rashi is going to help us. Shagag, if you made an error below miskab without intention, the Gemara is going to explain what this means. By other mitzvahs chayv michayiv for chatas. By Shabbos not michayiv chatas. So now the Gemara goes to explain the brisa to show what the brisa means, to then explain Rabbah's proof. So down the brisa is like this. The brisa opened up by saying, The stringency applies to Shabbos over other mitzvahs that you said Shabbos by Shabbos. Said that if you do two sins and one lapse of awareness, still one lapse of awareness usually you have only one chatas. On Shabbos you have a kolaf for each one individually. Other mitzvahs, no, you're not going to be chayav for each one individually. So what's the case talking about? Elam, if you're going to say, which seems to be the obvious case, the avi kitzir v'tchina. Oh, you did two different malachas. One was reaping, one was grinding, and you had a shigas malachas. So each one of the malachas you have a separate kamachatas, even though it was done in one lapse of awareness. So then the kavasag b'sham mitzvahs. Then you have to say the equivalent in the what you're contrasting it to all the other mitzvahs would be, let's say achachel b'dam. You ate forbidden fat and you ate blood, which that would be similar to grinding and reaping, which are two different acts that are forbidden. But then and then we don't understand the brisa. Then then both of them are actually liable for two. What do you mean? They're both the same thing. When you eat chaylev and dam in one halama, you chayev with two chatayis, just like you chayev for doing ketir and tchina in one halama. So what are you saying that, there's a stringency of Shabbos over other malachim, over other averis? Not true. Shar mitzvah would have the same liability. So rather, what do you have to say? By shar mitzvah, by other mitzvahs that we're saying the only liable for one karban chatas, what would that be talking about that you'd be putter with one carbon? Must be talking about tachal chaylev v'chaylev. That you ate in one lapse of awareness, fats, and again, fats. Where, it's the same sin, I get it. So one halama, you can have only one chatas. But then the kavasega b'Shabbos, then you have to compare it to Shabbos. The other ketir, then you have to say the same case in the equivalency of that you did a ketir, and then the one lapse of awareness you did again ketir. And again, we're back to the question. Then here is also one mechayiv, and here also one chayiv. So why are you saying here is two and there's one? When we ketir, one halama, no matter what the halama was, Shabbos or malacha, it's the same malacha, we have only one chatas. Says him like this. The truth is yes, now we understand by Shabbos you have two, because you did two different malachas, one of reaping and which is cutting, and one is of grinding. But then the question is, my masha in kim mitzvah. So what does it mean by other mitzvahs not like that? Why would you say you have only one? That's like chaylev and dam. You should have two. Because we're going specifically on avodah zarah. We're going on avodah zarah u'kedrabami regarding idolatry. Like Rabbi explains in the Sanhedrin, Perek Dal Mises, that he learns out from a pasuk that although avodah zarah, idolatry, just like Shabbos, has many different sins related to it, like Shabbos, you have many different malachas, there's many different prohibited types of activities regarding idolatry, there is no chilik chatayis avodah zarah. Learns it from a pasuk. All those different types of activities are going to only have one liability if it's done in one lapse of awareness. The Amar Bam, like Rabbi says, he says, zivech, if someone slaughters, or keter, or he burns, or nisach, or he pours libations, ba'alama achas, one lapse of awareness, and you can have only one liability. So that's what we mean when we say shar mitzvahs, which we find many times kol haTorah is compared to avodah zarah. We had this in the previous stuff. So we mean shar mitzvahs. We don't mean all other mitzvahs in Torah. All other mitzvahs, of course, you can chayav shtaim like Shabbos, which is like doing reaping and grinding is just like chaylev and dam. We mean avodah zarah. Shar mitzvah means avodah zarah. Avodah zarah, you do all different types of sins. And one alama, you only have only one. So the Gemara says, wait, we're not done with this yet. So what are you explaining in the brisa? When you're saying shar mitzvah means avodah zarah. So Ema Sefer, look at the Sefer. The Sefer says that chaymer b'shar mitzvahs, the stringency by other mitzvahs, over Shabbos. Why? B'shar mitzvahs by other mitzvahs, shagag b'lei miskaven. If you made an error without intention, chayiv can be chayiv. Mashing b'Shabbos, whereas b'Shabbos, no. If you did what's called shagag b'lei miskaven, then you're going to be pat. Says the Gemara, hi shagag, this that you did it inadvertently, but b'lei miskaven without intent. Would you tell me the shar mitzvahs means avodah zarah? Hechidami. What's the case talking about? What does it mean you did it with error, without intent, that you can be chayiv on the avodah zarah? In contrast to Shabbos, you can be patur. Elam, if you think to say that's kisaver beis haknesesu, person goes into, he thinks it's a shul, they call it a temple, and and he bows down over there. So wait a second. So first of all, this shkaga is an error because this is really idolatry, and he doesn't know that. Additionally, it's b'lei miskam without intent, meaning he's not even intending to bow down to idolatry. So it's a shagag and it's b'lei miskaven. So that's the case. You tell me he's michayiv achatas v'avodah zarah in contrast to Shabbos. How could you say that? His thoughts are to heaven. What type of liability would there be over here? As Rashi explains, even if the person knew this was a house of worship of idolatry and he bowed down there to God, to Hashem, there wouldn't be any liability over here. So what are you talking about over here? That by avodah zarah he'd be chayiv. Oh, Vayla rather says the Gemara, as we put over here, this Gemara is discussing 5 different possibilities, how to explain this case and rejects them all. Vayla says the Gemara, it's talking about the Chazi Adarta. He sees a statue, which is the figure of the king that they make as dignity and honor for the king. He bows down to the statue, but not for worshiping. And he bows down to it. Says what's the case talking about? Either if he's bowing down to it, accepted as his deity, that this king is his god. It's amazing. He's deliberate. If he's doing it deliberately, so then he's not chayav chatas. He's actually, when you do b'mezid, you're actually patur chatas. You can't bring a chatas if you do b'mezid. So how can you say that's the case? He'll be chayav chatas. And if he's not accepting it as his deity, so lav klumas, so it's nothing. It's insignificant. It's not avodah zarah worship. So why are you chayav chatas? Oh, Ella rather says Gemara. No, you're right. It's talking about me'ahava u'mehira. We're talking about someone that does avodah zarah out of love or out of fear, meaning because he has someone that is a loved one, that he has a lover of his, and because that lover wants him to come to temple, wants him to go to that idolatry, so he does it because he loves the person. That's Rashi's opinion. Or because he's afraid of the person. He's afraid the person's going to be, you better do this worship, so he bows down to avodah zarah. So Rashi explains, interesting over here, according to this opinion in the Gemara, which he was going to reject, the way he's qualifying this as the case of avodah zarah, shagag b'lei miskaven, interesting. It means to say, shagag, his error was that he thought that he's loy miskaven, meaning his error was that he thought since he's not intending to really do it, I don't believe in this religion, this deity. He thought it's permitted. His shagag was b'lei miskaven. So it's interesting, very different interpretation. What does it mean shagag b'lei miskaven? It means say his error was in that he thought that since he's not intending, he's permitted to do it, but that was his mistake. You're not allowed to do it. So that's the case by avodah zarah michai v'chatzis and conscience of Shabbos. So he's going, wait a second. That we still don't understand that case. That only makes sense according to Abai that he says in such a case you'd be liable. But according to Rabbi Dama Pater, he says no. In that case, the Gemara explains there machlekes elsewhere. You'd be Pater. So Michael, remember, you're back to the drawing board. What are you going to say? That can't be the case of when you're doing mehav meir, because Rabbi says that case if you do mehav meir, you're actually Pater. So what's going to be the case? But by the Zara of what's called shag b'miskaven that you'd be chay. Elrad the Gemara gives him the fifth approach. Says no, it's talking about b'oimamut. The person is saying that it's permitted. What do you mean he's saying that it's permitted? So Rashi gives an example. For example, let's say a convert that converted amongst the Gentiles, where he doesn't even know. He doesn't know that there's idolatry forbidden in the Torah. So that's not like a regular shkaga that you made a mistake. It's not you made a mistake. You were saying it's permitted. Yeah, I didn't know there's such a thing as forbidden. So that's called shagag b'lei miskaven. It's not just a shagag. It's not only an error. It's also without any intention whatsoever. Says the Gemara, Masha'enkin b'Shabbos. Wait a second. Okay, fine. So you got a case of avodah zarah. That would be the case b'oimamut. Oimamut, he says, permitted. That's a shagag b'lei miskaven that you be chayiv for chatas and avodah zarah. And you're saying Masha'enkin b'Shabbos, whereas by Shabbos that you're saying what? The pater legamri, that it'd be totally exempt from a chatas. Says the Gemara, Ad kan le'boiminei Rav Menachman. Until this point, all we had was the question Rabbi had from Nachman on the previous daf and Ayin Beis earlier in the parak. That he asked him the halacha of what's called helam zeb yadai. We had been discussing in our Mishnah, let's say you were shigas malachas and zadin Shabbos, or shigig Shabbos bezadin malachas. But then Rav introduced a new case. He said, what's the halacha if you were unaware of both? You forgot that it's Shabbos and you forgot that the malach was forbidden. Which that's essentially the same case we're discussing over here. And the Mefarshim explains there's a contradiction in Rashi on some point. We're not going to get into that. But Rashi says over here that's essentially the case of oimamuter, where you're saying it's permitted. Because you're saying there's no such a thing as Shabbos, and that's helam zeb yadai. You don't know that a malach is forbidden. You don't know Shabbos is forbidden. So that's the case you're discussing of oimamuter, which you're saying by avodah zarah michayev chatas, but by Shabbos you need pater. But that case of helam zeb yadai, which is this case of oimamuter, that Rav asked from Nachman, the only question he had was eli ilichi v'chad. His only question was should you be chayev only one chatas because it was all included in the shigas Shabbos. Or even chiv and you should be chayav two because no, you ultimately have shigas malachas, which were two different malachas. But to be totally exempt, no one ever said that at all. So therefore, you can't say that it's the case of oimamuter to explain the case of avodah zarah, because the only case we have left, we ran out of options to explain shar mitzvahs that we said that shagag b'lei miskaven that you can be chayiv v'chatas, and by Shabbos you're not going to be. That's a string of shar mitzvahs over Shabbos. You have Shabbos over Shabbos. You have shar mitzvahs over Shabbos. What's the case? We understand Shabbos over Shabbos mitzvahs is Shabbos over avodah zarah. That I got. We understand that by Shabbos you have chiluk malachas, and by avodah zarah, as the Gemara learns out elsewhere from Rav Dimi, that then you're going to have Ravami that you're not going to have chiluk malachas. You're not going to be chayiv separately on the zibach and the kitur and the nizach. Fine, that I got. But what's the shar mitzvahs versus Shabbos? You tell me shar mitzvahs mean avodah zarah. So where do you find avodah zarah shagag b'lei miskaven is michayiv and Shabbos not? We ran out of options. The last option we were up to was oimamuter. The problem with oimamuter is fine. That works for avodah zarah. Oimamuter, even Rav agrees that could be your chayiv, what's called shagag b'lei miskaven, your chayiv b'chatas. But then you tell me, it's not true. What's called Hel no one ever said it should be Patur Legamri. The whole question was, should be Chayiv on all the Malachas? Only one Chatas for the Shabbos. But you can be Chayiv something. So back to the question. So now we ran out of options. Now if that can't be the Mashen B'Shabbos, so then we don't know how to understand the case of what's the Shar Mitzvahs of the students of Shabbos. So as we continue to have Lamed Ayin Gimel and Aleph, the Gemara says Elulav. Rather, this is the conclusion. I mean, this is Rava concluding the explanation of the Brisa to then use to explain his opinion in contrast to Abai. It says, obviously we're talking like this. We have to separate, when the Brisa says Shar Mitzvahs, it doesn't mean the same thing in both the Reisha and the Sefer. Reisha Be'ak. The Reisha that the Brisa was talking about, the stringency of Shabbos over Shar Mitzvahs, that quote Shar Mitzvahs was referring to idolatry. Oh, that's a stringency of Shabbos over Avodah Zarah, where Shabbos Yichayv and Chilik Malachis, every Malach Yichayv a separate line below Yevachadas, but by Avodah Zarah, like a brought from Rami, you're not going to be Chayv. But the Sefer B'Shar Mitzvahs explains Rabba, what you have to say is, and everyone agrees to this point, that when we're saying of Shar Mitzvahs over Shabbos, it doesn't mean idolatry. It means really other mitzvahs. Other mitzvahs of Shagah B'Lem Eskaven is Michayv Achatas, not Avodah Zarah, and Shabbos you can be Pat. So on that, Rabba comes to explain, this is the final stretch over here, which he comes to prove his idea that Misasik is going to be Patur, even if you intended to do the action, but not the forbidden part of the action, that you can be Patur as Misasik, not like Abai holds that you be Chai. What's the right? So here we are. B'shagi b'lei miskaven, b'shar mitzvahs. So this that was saying that when you did an error, without intention, but other mitzvahs, that you can be Chayiv, Hechedim, what's that case talking about? So Rabba says, obviously it's talking about like this. The Savar the Shumanu, he thinks that it's permitted fats. Now, the reason why it's like this, because we have to understand what does the word shagi b'lei miskaven mean. Shagi is not just a classic shkaga. You're saying without even having intent. That's really what we call misasik. So, what is it talking about? You think it's permitted fats, but you're intending to eat in this, like we said from Rabbi Yonatan, it's literally like the case that we're going to describe for Shabbos. Where you're intending to eat this forbidden fat. You think it's permitted fats. And he eats it. As Rashi explains, that's shagag. You made an error because you thought it's permitted fats. It's also v'loi niskaven, which is what we call masasik, because you did not intend to eat the forbidden fat. And that the Bride is saying that you can be chai. Now, the question that is being brought up here that Rashi brings up is, wait a second, as we're about to prove for Rava holds that's considered masasik, because that's going to be his proof regarding Shabbos, as the Bride itself is going to contrast to Shabbos. Because you were loy miskaven to eat this isser. So then why you chai? So that Rashi just clarifies, that Shmuel explains exactly this crease of your testament base. Like by forbidden fats and by illicit relations, even if you're masasik, you're not intending to do this act, you're chayiv because what's called shekain neder. Because ultimately you had pleasure, and that's what's called shar mitzvahs. These are the shar mitzvahs that you would be chayiv, even though you quote unquote masasik. Yeah, masasik by shar mitzvahs, like by chelim and arayis, you can be chayiv. So you're intending to eat, you think it's permitted fats, and you're not even intending to eat. You don't even know it's forbidden fats. It's not when you make an error, you're also not intended, you're also masasik, you can be chayiv. Oh, says Rava, that's what the Bride is saying, Masha Enki b'Shabbos, he conscious the Shabbos. Then what are you telling me? That the putter, that you can be putter. So that is because you didn't have any benefit. It's not like Chaylev and Sharais. Oh, it says Rava, that supports his opinion. Because what do you see over here? This is the case that Rava was disagreeing with Abai. The Niskav and Lachte Chasatosh. What's the case by Shabbos you can be putter? Where you're intending to go ahead and cut what's detached, and you go and you cut what is attached, that you see that putter, you're going to be putter. That's how Rav explains. He says, what's the case talking about? What's shagav l'miskav? You have an isav chaylev, which he ate the fat, thinking it was shuman. So it's saying you michayev karmachatas because although it's masasik, we say masasik bechalav barais, you can michayev shekain neder. What's the equivalent case by Shabbos is we're intending to cut something that's detached. You think it's permitted, like the shuman. And you cut something that's attached, that you see by Shabbos you can be putter. Why? Because it's misasik, but you intended to do an act of cutting. You intended to do an act of eating. And still you see, even though you intended to do the act, but you didn't intend to do the forbidden part of the act, that's misasik. Where, yeah, here by Shabbos, I assume you're going to be chayv, but by Shabbos you can be putter. So you see like Rava. And that Abai will tell you no. He's going to tell you that truthfully, the case you did just described by Shabbos, you would be chayv, because that's not misasik. And shagag b'lei miskaven, this is the Bride saying that when you did an error without intending, heichi dami, what would the case be talking about by misasik, by shar mitzvahs that you'd be chayv, that would contrasting by Shabbos you'd be patur? It's a different case. the Savar Raiku, he thinks that this is spit, because this chalev was dissolved, uboloi, and he swallowed, not intending to do even the act of eating. As Rashi explains, spit is not something that's eaten; it's something that's swallowed. As he brings the pasuk actually in Eve, "Adbali roiki," until I swallow my spit. So it turns out that he didn't even intend to do the action. What ended up doing was an action of eating. He didn't intend to do eating. Oh, yeah, that parallel, Mashenga b'Shabbos, he got the Shabbos, the potter, then you'll be potter. Because that's the case of the Niskavan Lahagbia Satolish. He intended to not cut, but to lift up what's detached. And he ended up doing a different action of cutting. Oh, when they cut something that's attached, that's where you'll be potter. But on the Niskavan Lahagbia he intended to cut what's attached. Even though he didn't intend to do a forbidden cutting, but he intended to do a cutting, and then he cuts what is attached, then Michayev, Abai says, by the Isachev, he didn't even realize he was eating fat. He thought he was swallowing spit. Then you can Michayev, even though it's Masas. But by Shabbos, that parallel would be in the Skavan Lahagbiya. We intended to do a different act, not of cutting, but of lifting up. That's where you put from Masasik. We intended to do the act of cutting, then you Michayev Shaygig. That's Abai's opinion. Therefore, he rejects the proof of Rava from this price because it could be described in a different case that Abai would agree that that would be the halacha of Nesas. Some of these we discussed in today's daf. In Shabbos Daf Ayin Beis, we start off with the halacha of Ula. Ula said, according to Reb Tarf, that he holds that even by an Osham Vadai, you don't need a Yediyah. You don't have to have a Yediyah. It's not significant. You don't have to have a Yediyah in the beginning. So therefore, again, that's considered loy chashiva. That's an important concept that's introduced in the general context of Hashamis, that you don't have to have yediyas. So therefore, says we have the following halach: if someone has 5 acts of cohabitation with a shif charufa, which that's a liability of an asham, it's one of the 3 that you bring an asham for the sin. So on that says ula, according to Reb Tarfon, you only mechayev only 1 carbon, 1 asham. Why only 1 asham? Because yediyas are not mechalik. Yediyas are not differentiating. Yediyas are not on the chart regarding Asham. Chatas maybe, but Asham, Yediyah never comes into the picture. Okay, so Yediyas are not going to be mechalik. So even though you have an awareness cohabitation, doesn't make a difference. It's all going to be like just by the case of Mazid, where you did 5 in a row, you can decide only 1. Here also you can decide only 1. Oh, in contrast, and this was important because this later on is introduced as one of the 3 categories that we discussed, as the Gemara puts them all together. In contrast, after Hafrasha, then you did another act of Be'ila. Oh, that's what we call Rav Amnunas halacha, which is introduced later on. That's going to be a chiyuv, a separate chiyuv for each and every one, because the hafrashas are going to be mechal. Then we had Rav Dimi, which was really the same as Ula. He's just, instead of going on Reb Tarfon, he's just going on Rabbi Kiva. So Rav Dimi comes to explain Rabbi Kiva, where he says you do need to have Yediyah B'tchila by that of Asham Vadai. So according to Rabbi Kiva, you would be chayiv, says Rav Dimi, on every single one, because Yediyas are significant and therefore they're going to be mechalik, according to Rabbi Kiva. Now, the Gemara concludes, the Gemara is masik, the Gemara comes out that actually Rav Dimi's halacha was only if you do your maisa of Be'ila after the hafrasha. Because actually that's like the halacha of Rav Nuna. Because, and this is out of order, this is what the Gemara concludes, but before the hafrasha, and all you had was only yediyos, then it's actually not going to be that everyone agrees that Rabbi Kiva is going to hold the Mechaber each one individually. That will be a machlekes Rabbi Yechon and Shlakish. Just like they disagree by Chatayis, where we know by Chatayis you need to have yediyos betchila, and still we have machlekes Rabbi Yechon and Shlakish regarding the post game. The post-sin, their machlekes is, are yediyos machalik, as we explained at great length in the shiur itself, by the asham of the shifcha charufa, mid-sin is really the same as post-sin, one of the more complicated parts of the daf. The reason why it's the same thing is because usually you say by chatas mid-sin yediyos are going to be machalik, because the liability is because of your shkaga, of your halama. So when you become aware, you're not an halam anymore. So it's a new shaykig, a new chatas. But by Shiv Charufa, the awareness doesn't mean anything because the liability is even by mazid. So mazid is the same thing as shaykig, So therefore that wouldn't be significant. It would only be something that would be machalik, like a carbon, or what we call a kapara. That would be machalik, and therefore that doesn't make a difference. Mid-sin, post-sin, for the Asher Meshulchan, and therefore Shlokish would still hold even mid-sin, he decent not machalik, or even according to Rabbi Kiva, and therefore that's the third case of what we said is we had one case that they all agreed one way, which was Ula's case. But one case they all agree the other way, which was Rav Nuna's case, which is brought in the middle of the Gemara's discussion, which was really ends up being Rav Dimi's halacha. And then we had that they do disagree, which was the Havimin of what we thought Rav Dimi was, which is still Machlekes Rabbi Yochanan Shlakish. Then they moved on to Amid Beis and said a new related halacha. That if someone intends to lift up, that's an important word over there, what's detached, and turns out that he ends up cutting what's attached, so that's the famous halacha of Mesasik. You didn't intend to do an act of cutting. You intended to just lift up something, that's your pater from the chiv of Shabbos, not considered meleches machshavs. But let's say you intended to cut, that's important, to cut what's detached. And turns out he cuts what's attached, that's Machlekes Rav and Abai. Rav says you need pater, and Abai says chad. Abai says chad because he intended to do an act of cutting, so and you did an act of cutting, that was forbidden, so that's a shkagla. Rav says you pater, no, you intended to do a cutting, but not a cutting of Isser, so that's still considered as Mesasik. The rest of the daf was Rav's proof that you see a partial Mesasik, what's called a Mesasik. You intended to do the action, but not the forbidden part that's going to be considered Mesasik and be pater from the following brisa. The brisa says, Chaymer of Shabbos over Shar Mitzvahs. What's that Chumrah? The Shabbos, if you do two Behelam Echad, Chaymer every single one. Because you do Kaitzer B'Teichen, that's Shigas Malachas, Chaymer Nishu individually. Conscious Shar Mitzvahs, the Gemara ultimately concludes, Shar Mitzvahs means Avodah Zarah. Avodah Zarah, when you do Zibuach, you do Keter, you do Nisach, all those things, you're only going to be chayev only one liability. So that's the stringent of Shabbos over quote Shar Mitzvahs, which again, in the ratio the Gemara concludes is talking about Avodah Zarah. Then the Sefer says, but then we have a chumrah of Shar Mitzvahs over Shabbos. What's that stringency? So the Gemara ultimately concludes, and the Gemara rejects, it can't be Shar Mitzvahs in the Sefer referring to Avodah Zarah. It has to mean literally. Because as we said, we weren't able to find a case that it would apply that you'd be chayev by Avodah Zarah of the case of Shagud B'lei Meskam that you'd be chayev. Avanira doesn't work out, and Mamuta doesn't work out, all those, thinking it's a basic Knesset, Libel Shemayim, a statue. We said you're not going to have a case of Shagud B'lei Meskam that you can be chayev if you're not intending to do it. Yeah, Shagud, you'll be chayev. What's Shagud B'lei Meskam? And it's like a Masasik. You're not chayev by either you're mazed, you're not chayev a carbon, or you're not doing anything wrong. So the Gemara concludes, you're right. When we say Shar Mitzvah, we mean literally other mitzvahs. So the Gemara says, okay, so what's the case? This actually on the top of Ayin Gimel and Alpha already. This is at the point we're at on this part of the Gemara. So wait a second. What's other mitzvahs that you, A, made an error, and two, you're not even intending to do it, and then you'd be chayav? So the Gemara says, you think it's shuman, and you eat it, turns out that it's really chaylev. So although that's what's called misasik, as Rashi explains from a Gemara elsewhere, that since arayis, and the case we're discussing here in the Gemara, and chaylev, is something that you're nena from automatically, so even though it's misasik, you're going to be chayiv. That's regarding the parallel of Shar Mitzvahs, which is referring to chaylev arayis. On that, the Bryce is saying Mashenkin Shabbos. What's Mashenkin Shabbos? Mashenkin Shabbos, where you're intending to go ahead and cut what's detached. You're intending to do this. That's what Rabbeinu Tam said. It says literally Rabbeinu Tam would be more like Rabbeinu Tam. You end up cutting what's attached. You can be pater. That's a partial misasik. You're intending to do an act of cutting, but not the forbidden cutting. And you see that you can be pater. That is Rav's proof, because that's exactly the case you tell me of Shagud B'lei Meskavim. You didn't just make an error. You didn't intend to do, but wait a second, not intending to do by other Yisurim Hayichayev, must mean you intended to do the act. That's why you chayev. And you had benefit from it. But you didn't know at all that it was chaylev. You thought it was shuman. So that's exactly the case by Shabbos, where you're intending to cut what's detached and you're cutting what's attached. Where you're intending to do the act, but you don't know that it's something that's forbidden. And that Abai says no, not a right. It's not that it's like Rav is misasking the mitzvahs. He thinks it's spit, and he swallows it. That's important, the word swallow. That's where we're saying, okay, shekei nena. You had benefit. That's like Rashi brings from Shmuel elsewhere. So, misasik by, let's say, chalavim, would be chay. That's what the parallel is by Shabbos. We intended to lift up what's detached. Because swallowing spit is a different action. It's a different action than eating. So therefore, that would be the equivalent of picking up something that's attached and then cutting what's attached. That's where you'd be potter. That's the case of Mesasik. But the case you described of Niskaven Lachtoich as Ha-Talish, and you were Chaytich as Mechaber, then says Abai, no, actually, then you would be Chayt, that would not qualify as Mesasik, but there's no proof to Rava from this price or over that of Abaya. Thank you to any time for hosting us.